Welcome friends, today in the series of the history of India from 1750s to 1857, we will talk about the regional kingdoms and how regional kingdoms which happened to grow after the decline of the Mughal Empire, how some of these kingdoms they were related to the Mughal Empire in the sense that they emerged out, the governors were in a way connected to the rulers, and what we see that they were appointed as governors at that point of time and how they were working under the Mughal rule. We also see that some other kingdoms they emerged out of the kind of revolt because they were not very happy with the kind of the happenings which were there with regard to the Mughal rule. So when you tend to see the kind of references which you can use in the framework of the bibliography, you can see these books which are there on the screen. Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's From Palasi to Partition, then Lakshmi Subramaniam's History of India, and C.A. Bailey, Indian Society and the Making of the British Empire, NCERT and Agro Material. So all this you can refer when you are talking about the history of this particular times. And regional kingdoms, when you tend to see regional kingdoms, M. Alam he has talked about regional kingdoms in the sense that they represented a transformation rather than the collapse of the polity, and they also signified decentralization of power and not a power vacuum, and it was in a way relief against the autocratic Mughal centralization. So what we see in that context, that the historians, those who have tend to understand the regional kingdoms, they have argued that they were representing some kind of a changes which were coming there. So the polity or the political establishment did not collapse, rather it in a way decentralized in such a way that the power it got decentralized into different hands in the context of the regional kingdoms, and no power vacuum was created because these regional kingdoms they themselves played an important role for the time being, and thereafter how the British they took advantage of the kind of vacuum which was created and how they started ruling India in that context, that how initially they came as traders and over a period of time they started interfering in the internal affairs of these regional states and started ruling India. So if you see these regional states, then the centralization which was created by the Mughals in terms of the centralized bureaucracy, in the context of the centralization, in the context that how Mughals they were ruling India from Delhi, and thereafter these regional kingdoms they were some sort of a relief from that kind of centralization which we see. What also could be seen is that how these were founded by the Mughal provincial governors, like for example Bengal, Hyderabad and Awadh, these were the three states. Then by rebels, for example those who were rebelling against the Mughal state, Marathas, Sikhs and Jats. Then few states they asserted their independence, they were either functioning as autonomous but dependent polities like the Rajput kingdoms, Mysore. So what we see in this context, that there were different kinds of states, and these states they had in terms of origins, when we see that how these states they originated, then we will find that some of the states they came from the provincial governors, those who were appointed by the Mughal rulers. Some of them they in a way rebelled. So these states like Marathas, Jats, etc., they in a way rebelled against the Mughal rule, and this is how we tend to see the origin of the states. And if you see the idea given by Lakshmi Subramaniam, she talks about the emergence of the regional states in the context of a major turning point in the political landscape, that how regional states they tend to be some sort of a change in the political landscape of India, and how states were also diverse in their orientation and power base. So when you tend to see the regional states, we find that they were not uniform in that sense. They were quite diverse in their orientation, how they got emerged, and their power base were also not uniform in that sense. They were varied in nature. And what you see that how these regional states, they were united, then we find that it was a broad conception of power sharing with the new social groups, and a political economy that was geared to greater commercialization and to military contingencies. And on the other hand, at the same time, they were also competing with each other for the resources, and there was a situation of endemic military conflict. So what we find is that there was some kind of an idea which was trying to unite them, in that sense that they were in a way trying to share power with the new social groups which were emerging. And the political economy, in that sense that more and more commercialization should take place, and how the military contingencies in that context were also related. So these were some of the things with regard to the regional states, and at the same time these regional states, how they were competing with each other in the context that from the military point of view, some kind of a conflict or warfare or tensions which were going on between them. And later such kind of conflicts or military tensions, they were being utilized by the British for their own advantage. One of the important things or the changes was in the context of the revenue farming, that how this kind of a thing which emerged, and it was seen as some sign of a weak centralized authority by some people, and how it also undermined the existing relations of power and the social balance. But at the same time, there are some others, for example the revisionist historians, those who tend to see the revenue farming and how revenue farming is seen as the revisionist historians as an expression of the monetization and some sort of an innovative strategy, that the kind of changes which were coming in the economy, the kind of changes which were innovative in nature, and how they were in a way generating some kind of quick returns for the ruling establishment or the people, those who were in power, and how they could use them for their own military expansion. So revisionist historians, they tend to see the revenue farming in this particular context. And if you see the political economy of these regions, then the 18th century Christopher Bailey, he has talked about the political economy, that how it was determined by the conditions of warfare and the tendency to share power with a closer circle of elite groups which were drawn from the local society. So what we see in this context is that how the warfare, it was determining the political economy in that sense that how the military labor markets, they were also being created, how soldiers etc., they could be bought and sold in these military markets, and it also in a way that how soldiers, they were ready to be bought and sold, that how they were seen to be mercenaries, that how by the payment of money to them, they were ready to fight for that particular force or power. So this kind of a link between the military spending and commerce, that could be seen. And Christopher Bailey, he sees the presence of the large military forces, that how it stimulated the commercial activity and increased the flow of coin and credit in small centers. So this is how Christopher Bailey tries to see the connection. And there was also an appreciable increase in the urban development, when we will see that the military forces, they will be there, and when they will be competing in the commercial activity, these military forces, in that sense they will try to stimulate the commercial activity, because they will provide that kind of a climate where you will have some kind of a security for the commercial activity, and there will be more flow of money and credit at the small centers, which in turn will drive the urban development. And the urban development will also be very relevant in that context, that unless you will have urbanization and the urban development, then more and more commercial activity will also take place in these urban centers. And if you tend to see the successor states, then we find that the Bengal, Awadh and Hyderabad, which are referred to as the successor states, because they were part of the older Mughal setup, and Mughal governors, they over a period of time gradually broke links with the center, and they became autonomous in nature. Over a period of time, they severed their links with the center or the Mughal Empire, and they established their own authority or control over these regions. And how these ruling classes, they entered into an alliance with the local power holders, maybe zamindars or the merchant bankers or administrators. So some kind of administrative efficiency could be achieved. What we also see in this context is the growth of a scribe caste, which were known as Kayasth, and these people, they were involved in the administration as well as in the professionalism. And in the 18th century, in the second half, we see that how East India Company, which was emerging as a paramount power by succeeding the other regional states, and how it got engaged with wars with Marathas, Mysore and other powers. And East India Company, it had some kind of rapacious politics which eroded the power of the new states. So what we find is that the kind of changes which were emerging during this time, how a particular group became some sort of a mainstay of administration, in the sense that how it developed professionalism. In Kayasth, as a scribal caste, was very important in the bulwark or in the framework of the administrative efficiency. And how East India Company, it also played its own part, and how it succeeded the other regional states, how it entered into some sort of interfering in the affairs of the regional states, how it was able to secure revenue, how it was able to secure territory for itself over a period of time, how it eroded the power of the new states and assumed power for itself. So if you see the background of the East India Company, we find in the 17th century itself, in Bengal, they were given some sort of factory in Hooghly, and thereafter again in 1651, Sultan Shuja, he granted the privilege for the free trade. So in Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, the East India Company will start the free trade for a payment of rupees 3,000. So it was some sort of a very lesser amount in those times as well, and it was negligible in that sense, that how they were being given this authority or the power to trade for a very nominal amount. And this kind of a thing, it was given at several times. In 1717, again these kind of privileges, they were renewed for them, and Farrukh Siyar, who became the emperor, he renewed such kind of things for the East India Company. And how in 1698 the East India Company was able to secure the kind of rights over the villages, Sutanati, Kalikata and Govindpur. These were the three villages in which we find that they got the rights, and it is the present site of Calcutta. And the East India Company, from thereafter, it established its base there, and how Farrukh Siyar, he also confirmed their trade privileges. So that was the kind of background in which East India Company was working, and how East India Company was able to secure such kind of areas for itself, how as a commercial company it was engaging in trade and commerce, and thereafter it was able to establish itself in India. If you see the situation of Bengal, then we see Murshid Quli Khan, who was the governor of Bengal or the Nawab. So he brought certain reforms during the period from 1713 to 1727, that how transfer of a substantial portion of the land was done into the Khalisa or Khalsa or the crown lands, and he also streamlined the collection procedures. So if you see the situation in the context of revenue, then we find that Murshid Quli Khan, he brought about these kind of changes where he transferred the kind of a lot of land to the crown land, and when crown land or the Khalsa will be with him, with the Nawab or the state, then they will be able to have more production, they will be able to in a way increase the productivity of the soil, they will also have for themselves the most fertile regions. So, they will have more production in that sense as well. So, these were some of the reforms which were brought about by Murshid Quli Khan, and the zamindars, they were being given the task of the revenue collection, that the big zamindars, they will be engaged in the revenue collection task. There we also find that how the Jagat Seths and the Kayast scribes, both of them, they were important at that point of time, and Philip Calkins, he calls it as a government by consent. So, what we find that the house of the Jagat Seths, the Jagat Seths were the big magnates, the people, those who were very wealthy in Bengal, and this house of Jagat Seth was started by Manik Chand, and his successors, they were later given the title of the Jagat Seths, that these were the people, those who were very rich. And the Kayast scribes, again I will tell you that they were important in the context of the administrative spheres, and the government is referred to as a government of consent. If you see the conflict in Bengal, the Bengal conflict, in that sense that how Alivardi Khan, if you see the period on the slide from 1741 to 1756, and that is the period the dispute of the East India Company of Alivardi Khan and East India Company is on two issues. One is the misuse of dastak. Dastak was a pass which was issued by the East India Company to seek exemptions from the payment of the custom duties, and secondly, Nawab's demand for the demolition of fortifications at Fort Williams. So, these were the two things. We see that on these issues you find that Alivardi Khan and the East India Company, they were not seeing eye to eye, and dastak was a pass by which East India Company was seeking some kind of exemptions on the payment of the custom duties, but this was misused by the servants of the East India Company, because of which you will find that there was a lot of loss of revenue for Nawab, and at the same time the authority of the Nawab was also questioned. So, this was not liked by the Nawab, and Nawab also felt that if company will engage in the fortifications at Fort Williams, then his authority will also be jeopardized in that way, that some other company from another land is engaging in some sort of a political activity. So, that was the kind of basis of conflict between them, and thereafter we see that Siraj-ud-Daulah from 1756 to 57, he becomes the Nawab, and he had the kind of friction with the East India Company over the issue of fortifications, and how English, they were also giving support to the Ghasiti Begum, which was who was one of the another seekers of the crown in Bengal. That faction which wanted to secure the power at Bengal, and giving asylum to political offenders from Bengal. So, these were the reasons on which we find that Siraj-ud-Daulah and the East India Company, they were not happy with each other in that sense, and Siraj, he wanted that East India Company should mend its ways and it should accept the authority of Nawab. And that is how you see that there was a conflict, and Siraj-ud-Daulah, he attacked the Fort Williams and he captured Calcutta, and Nawab also placed Calcutta under Manik Chand, and he returned to Murshidabad. So, that was the kind of conflict between the East India Company and the Nawab, and East India Company was not ready to back out. In that sense, it was trying to create some kind of a conspiracy by when Lord Clive, he arrives in Bengal, and thereafter he talks to the influential people in Bengal, and how a conspiracy is hatched against Siraj-ud-Daulah, and how he is routed in the battle of Palasi, which was just a mere skirmish. It was not even a battle in that sense, that not many casualties take place in the battle of Palasi, and rather it was some sort of a treachery by which Nawab was removed. Another important incident with regard to the Bengal was the black hole, and the survivor of this black hole was J.Z. Holwell, and he was also the author of this story, there, where it was suggested that out of 146 white prisoners, only 23 survived the next morning. So, if you this was the incident which was there in 1757 in June, and there are others, those who reject this idea. They suggest that Nawab was not even aware of such kind of a happening. He did not know that prisoners, they were being kept in a one room. Some others, they argued that if you see this, the length and the breadth of the room, which was 18 by 14. So, in this particular room you will not find that 146 prisoners will be accommodated. So, the number of prisoners was comparatively around 50 or even less than that. So, there are a lot of divergent opinions with regard to the number of the prisoners which were there. There were divergent opinions with regard to the complicity of the Nawab in this incident, and how this incident was being used by the people, those who were connected with the East India Company, to create some kind of a public opinion for aggression against Bengal. So, this was the situation which was seen, and how British, they were trying to use it as some sort of propaganda, that how they will use black hole to incite the public opinion of the British against against Bengal. And if you see the situation before the Battle of Plassey, we find that how Robert Clive, he came to Calcutta and he bribed the people, those who were there, and how he captured Calcutta. So, we find that there was also a treaty of Alinagar between the Nawab and the British, and how that treaty was not even followed later, and British, they wanted to secure as much areas for themselves, and when the Battle of Plassey was fought, we find that it was just a mere skirmish. It was not even a war in that sense, and British, they resorted to treachery and deceit. And if you see the numerical strength of the British army and the Nawab's army was 50,000 soldiers, and British army on the other hand was 3,200. So, there was a wide disparity, and if you see the casualties in the battle, then we will find that nearly 500 people they died in the Battle of Plassey. So, in that sense you will not find it as some sort of a war, rather it was a mere skirmish, it was a conspiracy, so that British, they will be able to remove Nawab in that sense. And Mir Jafar, he was made as Nawab after the removal of Siraj-ud-Dawla, when Siraj-ud-Dawla was put to death, and thereafter Mir Jafar, he rewarded the British, and he granted the zamindari of 24 Parganas to the British, and other kind of favors they were being given to the British during this time. Apart from the zamindari of 24 Parganas, we find that other the monetary, the kind of money which was being given to the British at this point of time was enormous. Mir Jafar, he had to pay a lot of money so that British, they are silent. How even Lord Clive was personally paid a lot of money by Mir Jafar. He was given a personal zamindari by Mir Jafar. So, if you see the British approach during or before the Battle of Plassey, it was based on their own personal interest. If you see the character of the British, then we will find that it was full of deceit, it was full of injustice, in that sense that they were not ready to follow the kind of warfare practices which were there in the earlier times. They wanted to engage in all sorts of loot and plunder, and the Plassey plunder was definitely very important in that context, that Bengal became some sort of a center where more and more resources could be generated by the British. So, we will discuss rest of the issues in our next lecture. So, I would like to end the discussion here. Thank you.